Well, good morning, everyone. I was bebopping along to that music. I love having that little song on that gets us started. And I probably should say good day because we're on the Pacific side of the US, and some of you are all over the world in different time zones. So, welcome. I'm Laurie Battaglia, and I'm the CEO of Aligned at Work in Scottsdale, Arizona. And at Aligned at Work, we believe that leadership and diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging have to go hand in hand, that we really can't pull them apart any longer, and we can't ignore it any longer. We also believe in a healthy integration of life and work. Matter of fact, the birth of Aligned at Work was as Living the Dream coaches. And we talked a lot about aligning life and work and getting it right for us. So I believe that a lot of times when we do that, we have to make the hard decisions about what's happening in our lives, both present and in the future. I'm really pleased to have with me today someone that I've known for about 5 years. Her name is Alana Helapitage, and she is here to share with us her personal pivot through chaos. So, Alana, would you take a minute and introduce yourself?
I'd be happy to. So I'm Alana Helapitage. I'm an artist, a writer, and a holistic life coach. And my specialty is helping clients find who they are behind all the shit they do to keep their lives together. And through that, cultivate an authentic presence in all areas of life, take a stand for who they are, and feel both safer and more connected in their relationships.
Yeah, we have always, you and I, united on our quest for authenticity and being real and saying things the way they really are. So you'll hear some real talk today, folks.
Mhm.
Um, we had lunch a couple of months ago for the first time in forever, beginning to reconnect with people that I haven't seen in a couple of years. And I was really intrigued by your personal story of pivoting during the time of the pandemic. And we talked a lot about that. I know from my own work with folks in corporate and in organizations that so many of us have had this, what I like to call the great pause. We sat and thought about things when we went into lockdown. And maybe not then. Some people, it was a delayed reaction. Some were not locked down at home because they were first responders or people that had to be out there in public no matter what. But it was one of those life altering moments where so many of us ask ourselves, is this really the way I want things to be? Is this what I want for myself? And we saw people do everything from change jobs to move to somewhere else in the world once they could work remote, to start or end relationships. And so when we were talking, I thought, how cool would it be to have this conversation where people can watch us talk about it and weigh in with their own questions and comments on our LinkedIn Live. So, talk a little bit about your story and what happened to you in the last couple of years, how it all came about.
Absolutely. So during the pandemic, I was engaged and a mother figure to a little girl, the daughter of my partner. And we, as the pandemic came to a head and there was that work from, the lockdown, I was working for a massage studio, touch based business. That was obviously a no go. So all of the family was at home.
Mm.
And my ex-partner and I were both creatives, so as creatives we're kind of used to creating our own little worlds anyway.
Yeah.
So from a what do I do with myself standpoint, it was actually kind of lovely because we were forced to stay in our own little worlds. But I don't want to paint a utopia around that. I mean, it was jarring and harrowing at times to go outside or have to go to Costco and feel as though my fellow human beings were sources of contagion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Seeing, human beings just like me as diseases, and even myself. This was before, you know, in the beginning phases of a pandemic when no one knew what was going on, and
Right.
am I going to kill this poor old lady who's walking by me, or am I, you know, infected and asymptomatic, and oh, how much space should I give this person? How do I acknowledge their humanity without you know, dying?
Right.
It was
Right.
just surreal. And I know people have beaten that word to death when describing the pandemic, but it really was. Um, so I had that contrast between having this almost idyllic home life where my partner and I were, you know, learning how to cook beef bourguignon and listening to LinkedIn lives with our musician friends who could play 23 instruments, and I and creating a routine with our, you know, my then stepdaughter, and it was beautiful. And um you know, and then also struggling with the, how do I maintain my grounding and my humanity in this while trying to keep everyone safe, especially since I do have a blood disorder. It's not particularly serious, but I didn't know, you know, how this would impact me, and so I
Right.
felt particularly vulnerable. And then towards, you know, last summer, it became clear, you know, despite the beautiful parts of my relationship and my family, that that was not serving me any longer. And that relationship came to an abrupt end. I moved back in with my dad. I'm currently in my childhood bedroom,
Mm.
uh, which was humbling and uh, really taught me that having integrity can be a bitch sometimes. You
Yes.
know,
Yeah.
there's a beautiful phrase in Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way, which, whether or not you identify as a creative, I certainly recommend reading it because it
I
really
endorse
teaches
that.
you. Yeah,
Yes.
we're talking about authenticity.
Yeah.
That
That'll
book
get you there.
has lessons in spades about that. But what she says is sometimes um, going sane feels as though you're going crazy,
Yeah.
and
Insane.
you
Feels
know,
like you're going crazy. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and following that integrity and following that call to sanity and balance, and what do I truly need to be doing in life, for me in the initial phases was a really rude awakening to all of the pain and suffering and trauma that I had been hiding underneath this facade of being a, if not perfect, essentially wife and mother and entrepreneur, or at least a successful one. And so the initial phases, and even now, it was a confrontation with all of that, and this struggle to trust that that was necessary,
Yeah.
and that I had um, the patience and the faith in myself and in what I needed to do to see that part of the journey through, to get to a place where I could enjoy the fruits of my labor. And that's not to say I really don't like the getting out on the other side metaphor, because it implies that authenticity and fulfillment is a one-stop destination, and it's not. It's a constant unfolding of, this is what I don't want, this is the healing that I have to do, this is the growth that I have to do, and oh, these are the moments of grace and the rewards in my journey, and just going through that. So
Yeah. I think people think that there's a when I get there moment, and there
mhm,
are those little pause moments, and then something else happens. Or I've had periods of deep introspection and then pull out and live life and, not go deep for a while. And then, oh, here we go again. Deep introspection, doing the work, as we like to say, and just kind of figuring out what's going on under there. I know when the pandemic happened, you've met my husband, Joe, and worked
mhm,
with him too. And I said to him, we've had 5 years to get used to this. So when I left my corporate career, one of the things I was most happy to dump was the long commute, because I had commuted at least an hour on each end of the day for well over 20 years of my 37 years working for other people. And I was just really happy to be at home. Now, frankly, I wish he would find an outlet outside of the house, but he's an introvert. So this is his nirvana. And I said to him, you know, we've had 5 years to get used to this. I like you as well as love you. We had remodeled the house about a year before. So I didn't have that moment of sitting around and going, we need to paint those walls. We need to do this. We need, it was all done. And I had some conversations with, let's say, someone near and dear to me. I won't say who, but a family member. And I said, if this had been during my first marriage, this would not have been a good thing, because us being on top of each other didn't work well. It was better if we got away and came back together. And he agreed that yeah, that was the case. And I was just like, oh, I am really fortunate. We also don't have small children. So I watched some of my mom friends going a little crazy, like rightly so. But I didn't have any of that. It was kind of like if you had to go into lockdown, this is probably the best thing. I did have the trauma of not knowing. So Joe does all the shopping and stuff. I had to pick up that piece of it, or I chose to pick up that piece because he has like 4 risk factors. And I didn't want him out there because I was sure one of them COPD. And I'm like, this is not going to go well if you catch COVID and end up on a ventilator. Like I've seen you in the hospital. It's not an easy time for you. So I'm pretty healthy. I chose to be the one to go out when we needed to get something and to go at really off times of the day, like before dawn. I don't even know what that means most times because I'm a night owl, but it was just a really traumatic time of trying to refigure out everything. So it sounds like you were okay at the beginning of it, and the realization that this relationship needed to end was further further in and more toward when we came out of extreme lockdown and everything.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I think in the initial phases, and I think this is true of most human beings, is that when there is an element of survival mode, you focus on what keeps you comfortable. You focus on the things that bring you security and safety.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate in the initial stages of the pandemic that within our relationship we had lots of stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so although I will never dismiss how grateful I was for that, it became a distraction in a way from the introspection that I needed to do to realize, like, hey, okay, and this relationship is not sustainable. And part of my grieving process was realizing that ending a relationship is not a black and white experience. You can profoundly love someone, profoundly love aspects of your life together,
Yeah.
and yet still, this is not right. And for no, 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 no. Sorry, we're live.
Yeah.
I had to shoo my dad away. um,
That's the fun part of lives.
yeah, yeah.
Live
So
events.
again,
It's like
like
anything can happen.
moving away from that black and white thinking, and again having that faith in my intuition to go, although I invested everything I had and more in this relationship and this child, although so much of my identity, not only in that particular phase of life, but through most of my life journey, revolved around this idea of being a wife and mother, I had to trust in what I knew in my bones, which was I had been living for people more than I had been living for myself. And I had abandoned myself in that, in ways that I could no longer avoid because it hurt too much to do it. So even though, okay, I'm 35 years old, and this is generally the age where people are like, have kids or your eggs will shrivel up. You know, why aren't you married?
Yeah.
All of those things. And it was borrowing a phrase that I used earlier, that rude awakening to go, okay, that is going to be what it's going to be. I cannot capitulate to those pressures. I have to accept that life not going to plan is sometimes the best thing in the world. And
Yeah.
I have to wait out the initial phases of turbulence to
Yeah.
realize that in my own way.
And I wrote down what you said about I knew it in my bones, because I think whenever some big thing is coming to an end, relationships primarily, but even when people are in that sort of like mid career, because I do so much career work with folks, they're mid career and they've been doing things for a while, or they're in a relationship for a while, and suddenly they realize that it's just not it's not working, and you know it deep down inside, but it takes a while for that to kind of come out to the surface. You can get really busy and keep it, kind of behind you. You can just be oblivious to it. There's a lot of reasons that people don't acknowledge it, or when it does come up, it's like, well, what's that they say? The devil you do know is better than the one you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So at least you know how to get through that, whether it's a relationship or a job. So it bubbled up over time. It sounds like it was much more your awakening that it was that some catastrophe happened, and and the relationship went down. That's I think people think, I know I did when I was married the first time. It would just be great if we were either just really angry with each other, or somebody had an affair, or somebody did something so egregious that you could just be like, and I'm done. But that's not the way it goes sometimes. It's either the awakening of one to a different, like, I want something different. I know some great couples who have split, and we love both parts of those couples, but they just wanted different things in the future. They just wanted to go different. This one wanted to go down this path, and they tried to hold it together, but it was keeping both of them smaller than they would have been had they walked away and gone a separate path. So I
And
don't
you
really have
bring up
much there, but
you bring up a really important point of discernment, which is feeling safe and secure in your complacency
yes,
versus feeling safe and secure in your authenticity. And it's so easy, especially during a pandemic when there's so much risk and uncertainty around, to go,
yeah,
okay, this isn't ideal, but we love each other, might as well stick it out.
yep, yep,
And there might be so many rationalizations that you can give yourself to justify that. And
yep,
sometimes in the short term, especially when there are true survival needs at play, that is the right
right.
option.
A lot of people
Who's to
stay
say,
for
who's to
survival needs.
judge? Yeah.
Yep, yep,
And then, you know, we'll get to a point, or many people get to a point where it's, okay, now I'm seeing, yes, in spite of every rationalization that I could make for staying in this is not right.
yeah,
And for me anyway, my body just would not allow me. I could not tolerate on a visceral level being in that relationship and feeling okay with who I was,
yeah,
and how my life trajectory would be. And I am definitely not alone in that. There are countless people who discovered that in the pandemic. And I do want to generalize, it's not just personal relationships where that was happening, it was professional relationships too, our
yeah,
relationships to our work, our relationships to our identity. Oh, this job that my whole life revolved around is crap and killing me. And I'm making a lot of money and I have all of this, I've built this empire around myself
Yeah.
that feels like an illusion now. What the hell do I do? There
Yeah.
was that going on as well.
I think people had their defining moments also depending on how their employers handled the pandemic, going into lockdown, all those kinds of things. I think, I saw years ago that when it was an employee's market and there were more than enough jobs and employers couldn't find enough people, suddenly they wanted to get on the best employer list and they wanted to do all these things and they were great with really interacting and working with the employees. And then the market turned, employers started laying people off. Now there were more than enough to go around and they went back to treating people like shit. And I think people are smarter than they think than employers think they are. And I've been an employer, so I'm yeah. It's it's we see you can say one thing and you can be on all the lists in the world and it can still be a bad experience for folks that work there. And we're watching all the time when we work for someone else. We're watching people all the time. We're watching leaders around us in the world that are supposed to be leading us by the actions they take, not just what they say. And we always go by the actions that we see versus what we hear.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And the
Because,
authenticity factor is so important.
because the employers couldn't hide anymore, because we were in a life and death situation, and that's when people's true colors come out. Do you care
Yes.
about your people or do you not? Do
Yeah.
you value, okay, yes, I'm not in under any illusions that businesses are there to make money. We live in a capitalist system, no matter how conscious we are as business people. And the paradox is, in order to make a business functional, you need to not only care about your people, but care about them in a way that resonates with them and that you do consistently, and that you can, especially during a pandemic when no one was knowing what was going on, have the humility and the authenticity that goes, I don't necessarily know what I'm doing, but
Hmm.
I'm with you and we
Yeah.
are in this together and I care
Yeah.
and I need you as much as you need me. And
Yep.
I want you to feel like you have a say in where the trajectory of the company goes. And if when leaders weren't willing to do that, because of that confrontation with that life and death uh, sense of, okay, as human beings, we really need to focus on what really matters, the employees were going, especially in the more entry level jobs or manual labor or service industry, it was, I can make more money on unemployment. I'm not going to slave away for you. You don't even value me.
Right. Right.
I
And
need
that
to prioritize.
boomerang just keeps coming back around. Boy, it's
Mhm.
people have not forgotten what
Yes.
if it was bad employment. I think the other thing that happened was the authenticity factor went up for a lot of people when they were working from home and in came dad or in came the husband or the wife or the whatever, the dog, the cat, the kids, all interrupted. And I had meetings go like last minute cancellations or no shows. And it was typically someone who had kids at home who had a catastrophe happen. So, and maybe we transition to kind of mental health because I know kids had a lot of issues. I have a granddaughter who has had some issues with the remote schooling and stuff where some thrived in it, some did not. And some were, that the family's got to take priority, I think, when you're at home and everybody's around you and it's work meeting or school and this one's having a meltdown. Well, what are you going to do? So we saw the humanity, we saw the human side of people a lot more, no matter how high they were on the food chain of, corporate life. If they had a lot going on around them, then you saw some things. And I think it made people more human. I'm concerned that we're going to button back up and force people back into offices that don't necessarily want to be there all the time and put on the suits and the high heels again, which I don't miss at all and refuse to wear. So, I'm
And
like,
I
yeah,
love you
that's
for
not
that,
happening anymore.
Laurie. I love you for that, Laurie. I'm like the exact opposite. I think it's because I'm a European snob, and
There you
when
go.
I was working at a non-profit, I kept fantasizing about making enough money to wear the Christian Louboutin heels.
Yeah, yeah.
But I
I
totally
used
get where
to.
you're coming from. It's that um it's, are we going to forget the lessons that we learned during the
Yes.
pandemic
Yes.
and uh,
So easy
make this,
to do.
yes, and
Yeah.
make this tacit agreement with ourselves that going back to normal means going back to the way things were.
Yeah.
And I
I
I'm
hope not.
optimistic that a lot of us aren't willing to do that. That normal means something very different now,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that normalcy has a lot more to do with authenticity and the integration within all of the aspects of ourselves and our lives that need to happen in order for us to survive and thrive. And
Yeah.
I'm all for that kind of normalcy.
Have you gone through any type of, I can only imagine there's been something, but any type of burnout or, work concerns about your own mental health during this time or even other times as well? But I think this sort of brought it to a head. I definitely have that sense of burnout. It's less now than it had been, but it started last December and it just kept going. Like it, I couldn't sleep my way out of it. I couldn't. Every vacation seemed to get canceled or rescheduled or not be what I thought it was. All of that. So, any sense of burnout or mental health issues or anything like that for you?
100%. Yeah, it was so humbling because I have focused so much of being of service to clients' mental health and their well-being, and a key part of that is embodying what that means.
Hmm.
And what I realized was that doesn't excuse me from this naked confrontation with my own pain and suffering
Yeah.
at all points along the phase of my journey. And yeah, I've been exhausted just at an existential level. Like,
Yeah.
everybody and everything is like pissing me off. Like,
Yeah.
I'm the type
Yeah.
of person, I'm also half Italian, so anger is not a stranger to me. and, and so my fuse is shorter. It's an
Yeah.
interesting kind of paradox because my fuse is shorter. I don't take as much shit. I can't be bothered with so much of what I would have done, a couple of years prior. And in being able to accept that about myself, I'm also a lot more patient with myself and others. I've learned to be uh, more real about my limitations
Hmm.
so that work can become more sustainable to me. But yeah, none of that in any way diminishes. Like, damn, it's hard to
Yeah.
just exist.
Yeah. Definitely. And so I noticed that we have a question, and I want to encourage people to go over into the comments section. We can see those coming up here on StreamYard. And Angela has, well, first I want to say thank you to Nikisha and Yasmin for weighing in a little bit earlier with comments. Much appreciated. And Angela's got a question. Speaking of normalcy, do you think it's an empathy factor where leaders who lack empathy are pushing for going back to normalcy or something else? And how do we keep pushing for that human factor in leadership? I have
Mhm.
things to say about that. But Alana, do you have things you want to weigh in on first?
I'll let you jump in on that.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So Angela, I'm just going to call out Jamie Dimon, the Chase Bank, I think he is, yeah, CEO, because I'm a former banker, and all of his folks that are like him out there, because he is pushing for everybody to be back in the office. That you have to have FaceTime and you have to be around people, and the real go-getters will want to be there. F you is what I say, because I think that there's multiple ways to do business these days, and we lock ourselves into this paradigm that really worked well, frankly, for white men, especially white men at the top of organizations. Worked really great for them because there was this whole pecking order and there was this whole process of what you needed to look like, what you needed to do, how you sucked up, how you performed, although I've seen sucking up get you better than performance from time to time, depending on where I worked. I'm sick of that kind of leadership. I think it's old. I think it's dead. And I think sometimes the people that are pushing that don't know they're old and dead. And I think that people coming into the workforce aren't going to put up with it. Now, I do believe that we're sort of in this big search time of, is the perfect employer out there somewhere? I know a few that I think are as close to perfect as humans can be, because nobody gets it right all the time. Nobody gets it right all the time. Let me say that again. Nobody gets it right all the time. So I feel like I just jumped up on my soapbox here. But this is what I live and breathe every day. And I think that when people like you and I, Angela and Alana and Nikisha and Yasmin and the other folks who are listening on here, when we stand up for ourselves and say this doesn't cut it, and for a lot of us it never did, then why not? I'm all for hybrid. Like, do what you need to do, work from where you need to work from, but don't force people into this bucket and knock off this crap about needing to be in front of somebody physically or being out on the golf course playing, because a lot of business still gets done there. I thought golf was old and dead too, but it apparently is not. So I just think that we've got to take a look at every single system out there, hold it up to the light of day and say, is this working for people? All people, not just one gender, not just one race, not just one age group, not just one anything, religion, politics, whatever you want to put on it. Does it work for everybody? Is it equitable? Is it just? And are we really getting people engaged and involved? And I think we just have to keep pushing, 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 because changes do get made. I think in the world in gender or in general, I fought the fight for women's equality. And I have moments where I think nothing's changed, especially with backslide that we're going through right now with our Supreme Court and things like that. I believe that we need to keep plowing forward because change happens very tiny steps. Sometimes there's a revolution, a lot of times there's an evolution. So, where I can look back to 1978 when I got into banking and say everything's changed, on the other hand, nothing's changed, I think both are true. And it's people like us that are just going to keep pushing this forward. Like, we need to be human. We need to honor that with people.
Yes.
I'll shut up. So,
No,
would you like to say anything?
I would. So the initial question was around empathy and leadership. And I would like to take a mental health lens in addressing this.
Beautiful.
What I find, and I include myself in this, a lot of us who are attracted to positions of leadership often have a history of codependency and a need for control. We were often the ones who had to hold everything together in our families growing up, or have this identity around proving our worth, around keeping the status quo, keeping the peace.
Yeah.
And so in a situation with, and again, I keep going back to this topic of uncertainty, no one really knows what the hell they're doing. Everyone
True.
is,
True.
experiencing levels of stress and awakening that were unprecedented. Well, not everyone, but lots of us. And all of those factors that we revolved our life around in order to hide ourselves and not connect with people no longer hold up. So I think the leaders who are succeeding the most are those who are willing to have those we versus I conversations and go, I'm struggling, you're struggling. I'm not, I'm dealing with this complexity of trying to figure out how to keep good people on the job.
Yeah.
Keep us growing, keep us invested in this mission. And I need you to tell me what you want and need
Yeah.
in order to feel like this is something that you can give a shit about with all of the pressures surrounding you to keep up with your mental health, to sleep, to take care of your families.
Yeah.
How do we do this? Not how do I dictate to you how you're going to do it to make sure that I feel safe in my need for control.
Yeah. I loved when you said that about the need for control, the codependency. I was like, who's she talking about?
Yeah, there's a lot of us out there, Laurie.
It is so true. It is so true. Because some of us come in and we're like, I need to be in charge here. Like, so, been there, done that, still doing that. Yeah,
Yeah.
still need to be in charge. Um, yeah. So, I don't know, Angela, if you want to weigh in as to what you think about any of that or give us some of your own thoughts about that, we welcome that. Obviously, we can't put you in on StreamYard, but you can answer in the box. And anybody else who's listening in, if you have any questions for us, we're going to probably talk for maybe 5, 10 more minutes. So if you want a question answered, please do type it into the chat, or not the chat, but the it shows up on our chat. Type it into the comment section on LinkedIn and we'll see it and then answer it live for you. And we'll be back out there later. By the way, this recording will be housed on LinkedIn. It will also be over on our YouTube channel later today. If you go over to YouTube and Google Aligned at Work, please subscribe. We need subscribers over there. And you can easily see a lot of our videos and things that we've already done over there. So let's see. So, Alana, what advice do you have for people who are considering they may have had the awakening moment or they may now be pondering things based on this conversation today? What's your best advice when people get into that point of life? And I know from having lived a long life so far that it happens time and again. Like there are periods of time in between, but then there's these transition periods. What advice do you have for people when they get there?
My advice is spend some time thinking about how much of your life revolves around trying to be in control versus trusting yourself and the people in your life to make your life what it needs to be day by day, moment by moment.
Yeah.
Because so many of us conflate the words success, the words
Yeah.
fulfillment, the words authenticity, the word, all the things that we want with, I have to be in control in order for this to happen. And none of us are.
Mm-hmm. That is so very true. You know, you make plans and God, the universe whoever it is, laughs. Um, it's kind of funny. I still make plans, and I probably have a plan A, B, and C, but then stuff happens and things don't go the way they're supposed to in your own
Mm.
mind. And it's what happens to you when that happens. I see people who are so rigid that they can't go with the flow. They just don't know how to go with the flow, and it rocks their world. The more rules they can have, the better for them. And I prefer no rules overall. Now, you know what? Having said that out loud, I do want systems and agreements in place where people treat each other kindly, and that it's good for all. I do want that in place. But overall, the rules of how we look, what we wear, what we do certain times, I think need to go. And Angela has said, thank you, agreed about that need of being fed for so long that sometimes leaders forget to pause, breathe, and look up. Remember who you are and who they are. Yeah, yep, definitely. So let's see what else I've got for you. So, what is your next big thing? I know you have people in mind that you're working with and that you want to work more with. Um, Share what your next focus is, and then how do people get in touch with you?
Absolutely. So I am launching a program called Brave New Human,
Love
which
it.
is geared towards the millennials, particularly older millennials, who break the mold with their intuitive, sensitive way of being and are exhausted by all they do to prove their worth, to keep the people in their lives at arm's length, even despite their best intentions, because they feel profoundly misunderstood, who feel like they're becoming strangers to themselves because they can no longer align who they are on the inside with what their life looks like on the outside. And this program is really an intensive, generally 6 weeks. It can be longer depending on the needs of the client. It's a 6 week immersive journey in my personal created meditations and writings that I create for people to bring them into alignment with their authentic presence, with taking a stand for who they are, with feeling self and more connected in their relationships, like I mentioned in the beginning, along with my signature self inquiry process, which
Mm,
typically combines journaling and a spiritual direction practice, which, whether or not you identify as spiritual, is incredibly practical, called deep listening,
love it.
as well as some communication and physical practices to really live out the truth of those three actives, those three components, the way each client needs to, and in a way that feels both nurturing and beautiful to them.
Lovely. I like that title, Brave New Human. And if somebody happens to not fall in that millennial thing, are they welcome to get in contact anyway? They're Gen X, boomers, whatever, Gen Z.
Oh, yeah. I don't
Yeah.
care who you are, where you are. Like, if you need the work, my doors are open. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. And then how do you want people to get in touch with you? What's your preferred way for them to reach out?
Absolutely. So, the best way is via email. Um, I have a couple of links posted here with flyers where that's included, but it is a shared uh, SHARED path, contact at gmail.com. We can schedule just a discovery call. I'm very no pressure to just get a better sense of where you are in your journey to authenticity, and living in alignment with who you are and what you need to be supported in that. Um, we also can have a more uh, intensive conversation that will also be complementary, called Tea and Transformation. I can come to your house, we can do it virtually, have tea, have a more kind of a free coaching session, and then decide whether or not I'm the fit for you. Yeah.
And I think it's a shared path contact, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we'll have that fixed in a second. A shared path contact at gmail.com is the way going down, coming back up. So we really appreciate, there it is, beautiful. Thank you, magical assistant in the background. We really appreciate you. So I do want to ask people if they've got any more questions. We're about to wrap up, so please put them in the comments ASAP on LinkedIn. If you are just listening to this afterward, that's one way to get a hold of Alana. And you can also find her, I'm sure, on LinkedIn. And then I'd like, Yasmin, can you put up the slide that has a QR code on it? And I'll just tell people what that is. One of the things that we've got at, there it is. There's the bit.ly link for you folks. If you would like to have 10 tips, very practical, everyday tips for what do I do at work to include everybody, you can hit that bit.ly link for 10 inclusion tips. And that will definitely be a place. You know, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can generally also find Aligned at Work on Facebook and IG as well. We tend to post most of our content on my LinkedIn because of my follower network. So please follow us there. And I want to thank everybody for coming today and for listening in and for considering their own path and their own authenticity and their own times that they've kind of figured out in their bones that they needed to do something different than what they were doing. Because most of us have that happen. If you haven't had it happen, it'll come, because that's the human experience. So by all means, go over to LinkedIn. Go over to YouTube and look up the Aligned at Work channel, subscribe there. This will be up a little bit later today when it all goes through processing and things. Sign up and continue to follow us. And if there's anybody, hi, Susan. And if there's anybody that would like to recommend a speaker or somebody that they'd like to see me just have a conversation on LinkedIn Live, happy to consider that. You can also get a hold of me at Laurie at alignedatwork.com. So Aligned at Work, all spelled out. You can see it up there behind me and in the corner of our StreamYard. And Laurie, Laurie, and it'll come right through. So there we go. Anything else today? Any final words, Alana, before we hang up?
I would say do your best to keep the pressures you put on yourself as small and as simple as possible. Sometimes the way towards growth and healing and success are taking smaller steps than we think that we need to.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And thanks for spending your time with us and talking to people. I'm sure folks will be reaching out. So thank you, everyone. Have a good day wherever in the world you are. And we'll see you on the next LinkedIn Live. Have a great one.